Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And if you enjoy the ideas we share in these podcasts each week and you want to learn more, check out our free basic course in Living from the Inside Out at michaelneill.org/basic course. The phrase "where there's a way, there's a will" came to me probably 20 years ago when I was working with a client, and I noticed that they consistently would start with the assumption that there was no point in trying things because it wasn't going to work. And then they'd get a little bit of success, and all of a sudden they'd get excited about it. And all of a sudden they'd bring so much more of themselves to the project. And before long, they'd start to achieve more results and get a momentum going. And once we spotted the pattern, that, we always, the cliche is where there's a will, there's a way. But in fact, if we're convinced that something's not going to work, we don't really even bring any energy to trying if we try at all. Whereas once we start to get a little bit of success, once we start to sense that something really might be possible, we have all the energy that we need to go about creating it. And even though I'd been teaching that for a while and sharing that with my clients in different ways, the most dramatic example I ever had in my own life was around a goal that I'd had on my list since 1990. So from 1990 onwards, and that was my first year out of school when I started out trying to launch a business and be successful, was I had the goal of making $1 million in my business. And it was a cool goal, and I'd get excited about it, but I never really seemed to get anywhere with it. And some years I'd start out and try really hard, but then within a month or two, I'd have given up on it. And I did, as most people do over the years, begin to make more money doing what I did. But this still felt like a sort of whatever. And so one year I was sitting down with a new coach and running through my goals for the year. And I got to number 7, and number 7 was make over $1 million in my business. And I paused. I didn't even say it out loud. And the coach said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, I've had this goal on my list, to make over $1 million in my business. And it's just silly. It's like saying learn Italian, and I'm never going to do it. So there's no point." And I went through this whole thing, and I just clocked my coach raise an eyebrow, and I saw the eyebrow go up, and I just went, "Oh, wait, they don't think this is impossible." And it was just enough for me to consider, wait, what if I actually could? And that year was our first $1 million year in business, and it was extraordinary. And in fact, I went back to that coach and said, "Do you remember doing that?" And they had no idea what I was talking about. But what I came to see was, oh, me too. Where there's a way, there's a will. I didn't know how I was going to do it. But it was the first time after, I think at that point, 17 or 18 years of having it on my list, where I even considered that it might actually be possible. And it made me think of an old thing that used to be written in a lot of success books in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, kind of the Think and Grow Rich, magic of thinking big type book that very popular in business and sales and entrepreneurial culture. And it was this idea that what the mind of man can believe and conceive, it can achieve. And I used to think, oh yeah, whatever, that's, okay, believe in yourself. And I was very dismissive of it. But I've come to see that there's a real truth in it, that until you are at least open to the possibility that something might actually be possible, it's really difficult to conceive of doing it, being it, having it. But once you open up to the idea that it's possible, once you can conceive, oh, you know what, this could actually happen, it's extraordinary how much more energy you have around it, how much more creativity you start to bring to it, and not always, but how often it can actually come into being. There's an old quote that's attributed to Henry Ford that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. But what I've come to see is that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you don't actually know. So why limit yourself by guessing? So if you want to sort of begin to play with this idea in your own life, I suggest if you have a goal list, you can look down your goal list. If you don't have a goal list, just think about some things that you've wanted for a very long time, but they've never happened. Some people say that I've wanted to be in a relationship forever, but I just can't get into a great relationship. Or I've wanted to be able to do this for a really long time, but I've never done it. And just notice, do you even really consider the possibility that you can? Or are you going, well, given that it's never going to happen, I sure would love it. And it's almost like run it by the raised eyebrow test. Like if I was with you and you shared it with me and I raised an eyebrow, would that be like, maybe I could do this? Or do you already know that you could, and maybe you just don't actually want to spend as much time on it as you thought you should or you thought you might? And what I've found when I've run people through this is there's usually one or two things that have been on their list forever, but they've never really considered that it might be possible. And if that's you, consider that it might be possible and see what happens. Have fun, learn heaps, and happy exploring, and I'll talk with you soon.